everyone. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Wayne Bridges and I'm chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note the members of the committee will be using tablets and laptops to view the agendas today. Some quick housekeeping rules before we go on to our main agenda. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one sounds, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. And for those in the room, please switch off any mobile phones and devices or place them on silent. We also have resident feedback forms available here in the room and on YouTube underneath the broadcast. We move on to our main agenda. The apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies are received from Councillor Peter Smallwood, with Councillor Kishan-Batt substituting. Thank you.
Thank you very much and a warm welcome to Councillor Batt this evening. We move on to item 2, the declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? I can see no indications, so I'll move on to item 3 to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 10. Are those read and agreed? Thank you. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1. There are no part 2 items to be considered, which moves us on to item 5, the budget and spending report, pages 11 to 18. Officers here this evening for this report are Dan, Bernard and Andy. Dan, good evening. If you're ready, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. You have the report before you for month 5, which is obviously drawing on the information available in the public domain in the Cabinet report recently. So for my directorate, and obviously it covers a number of Cabinet member portfolios, I'm showing as an £8.8 million overspend at month 5, which is mainly attributed to temporary accommodation pressures in the main, quite significant, 6.5 of that. There is some underachievement on income around parking charges as well as an underachievement on the green waste subscription service charges, of which there was a £2.5 million target, and we're achieving, our forecast to achieve 1.6 or 1.7. The housing revenue account, which is the housing landlord budget, is reporting as a break-even position. I won't go through any more details at this stage, Chair, but very much welcome questions.
Thank you very much. I invite questions from members. If there are any, please indicate. Councillor Gohill.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Dan. Just a quick question on the parking income underperforming. Do you think that was because of a sort of post-ULEZ behaviour change, or do you think it was a bit more of a pricing issue that might have led to it? And do you know if we'll be able to get the data to tell the difference, if you do know the difference?
Thank you. It's a good question. I mean, just to say we're doing a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work to really strengthen our data and understanding. So much so that we've got information now by car park, payment machine, times of the day, etc. So we're getting some rich information. It's probably a little too early to say exactly some of the reasons. I mean, some of it will be charges, but our charges are competitive compared to most boroughs. What we're trying to understand is, I suppose, patterns and usage to inform our proposals for the next budget sitting round. So we're going through that process at this stage, and we're working then to better understand and to recommend proposals which we know are actually absolutely based on sound, robust data.
Councillor Gohill, do you have a supplementary?
I have a second question, yes. It's not related to parking, the next one, but I was just trying to think ahead out maybe to next month, and appreciate if you tell me it's not in the remit of the committee or whatnot, but I'm looking at all the speculation about what's coming up in the upcoming budget from the Chancellor, and one thing that's sticking out again and again and again is a potentially 1 or 2p increase in income tax. I'm wondering if how that might, if you have any forecasted information on how that might impact our budget, or you know, have we taken it into account for the following months ahead, because it will significantly increase our costs as a council.
Thank you. I mean, it is obviously difficult to understand exactly how that might affect residents and their spending patterns, and obviously which in turn means whether they shop and park, etc. I mean, I think it's really one we just need to keep a very close eye on and be ready to respond. And we are looking, of course, in terms of our budget build, which will be presented to Cabinet in December for consultation, the cost of living and wider sort of socio-economic impacts as well. So we're doing our very best to take it into account, but it's quite hard to predict how that might impact on spending patterns.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. So my first question, Dan, is on housing. So I can see from the report that we brought 400 houses, I believe. How comes we've not seen a difference in the temporary accommodation figure? Because I would have expected to see over the last few months it dropped down. Has that got anything to do with the influx from the Chagos Islands or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a sort of number of different reasons really. So one is demand has increased. So in our budget build at the beginning of the year, in forming this year's budget, we had a lower number than expected arrivals of UK nationals. And so just to illustrate the point, we've seen or experienced last month 40 arrivals from households presenting as UK nationals, which amounts to well over 150 individuals, so families, so 40 families, all of which we need to support because they presented without onward accommodation. And so that was higher than we've actually built. So demand, I think the key point is demand is higher. We've seen in some spikes in demand. The other significant point is that as part of our plans for the year, we'd set out to secure a number of leased properties, and either there are a combination of things are either arriving later, or secondly, when we've sought to secure those leases, they've been offered to us at much higher prices than actually are financially viable. So we've had to take them out of the forecast. And the reason that's significant is because those leased properties would have been cheaper than the spot purchased or high cost temporary accommodation, and so our supply of lower cost accommodation has pretty much reduced. And so we haven't given up on it, and we're in negotiation with a number of prospective sort of partners. It just means that for the purpose of setting a realistic budget, we've removed them until we're more confident that we can secure a deal at the price that is right for our residents.
Okay.
Councillor Davis, do you have a follow-up?
I do, on something completely different, as always. Trade waste. Why are we not making any money out of commercial trade waste when places like Biffa, other companies are raking it in? Why are we not?
In a very direct way, we get undercut by our competitors, and so we are taking the opportunity to completely review our approach. We need to be very much more agile with our pricing and our offers, and we publish, for example, all of our fees and charges, and straight away our competitors know exactly what we're going to charge, and can just say, do you know what, if you're with the council, we can offer you this special deal, and which is an introductory deal. So it isn't that we can't compete. We've got to change our approach to compete.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. There's a point of clarity. This is month 5. This is up to September. Is that correct?
August.
It's August. Right. Okay. This leads on to my question. Is that our last meeting was in September, and in the minutes it did say, at the request of members, it was agreed that clearer language would be used in future reports to avoid ambiguity. Office committed to improving clarity in future updates. Forgive me, but the report still is very difficult to read, and again, as I pointed out at the last meeting, this is meant to be giving transparency to residents, and it's not there. So I'd like to know what it is that's been done, if anything, and if not, when this will be improved to make it clearer for the layman, essentially, because residents aren't necessarily financially minded. They need to understand what this is all about. Thank you.
We can certainly note that, and we welcome any feedback from members about how we can improve the presentation of the report.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. In the question again is Table 1, and I think Table 2 as well, it refers to management action. In Table 1, is it adding cost? I want to know why it's adding cost. If I'm understanding, again, the table correctly, it appears to be adding cost as a result of management action, whatever that is.
They are, I mean, in the process whereby we are producing the monitor, what happens is that managers do their part where they have a look at their individual parts, and then it actually moves up to another level, which is like usually I do it or somebody at my level, and we review what's been done, and if there are any adjustments that we need to do at a later date, closer to the time that it's got to be reported, then we do those adjustments. And those are the management adjustments that we do based on knowledge that the manager, the actual budget manager, may not have. So that's what they are. And there's a whole list of them, but these are aggregated. We could give you that kind of detail.
Councillor Core?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of overspend in planning, housing and growth, we are saying there's a 7.3 million overspend and there's adverse movement of 2.6 million from month 4, which I don't know, coming up to this point, which way is it going? But then we continue to say that pressure is largely driven by temporary accommodation, and we continue to refer to Hillingdon, particularly impacted by Heathrow. While in last meeting's conversation, we found out that temporary accommodation presented through Heathrow was 10 to 15%, and the variance, which is huge, which is more than 50%, it can't just be due to that. There has to be more issues to that. So I think leaning on the word Heathrow over and over again, it just shows that we haven't, Heathrow is going to stay with us forever. It was there before, it will be there after. So for how long are we going to use Heathrow as a place where we are not planning properly to take into consideration all the things that come with it? Thank you.
Just in response to that, I mean, what's very hard to predict is the numbers of arrivals who do come through Heathrow, who then present to the council needing housing support. And just to remind committee that those who do present to the local authority who are a UK national, that they don't satisfy what's known as the habitual residency test in most cases, which means that we need to fund everything in terms of food, accommodation, clothing, everything for a period of time. And we've seen a significant spike in numbers in recent months, much higher than other ports of entry into this country. So when we've approached government, we've been told they'll only fund, their policies only fund the first 10 days. And a typical period of time to resolve habitual residency, and subject to that being resolved, it means that the individual household can then claim financial support from the state, can take 5 to 6 weeks or longer if there's disputes. So it means that it isn't that the cause, a significant cause of the variance is due to those much higher numbers of arrivals, which I don't think anyone could have predicted, because the spike in arrival, the initial arrivals started in July 24, and it's increased. I mean, I was talking to another local authority that connected with Gatwick last week, and whilst they've had pressures, the pressures are lower than we're seeing in Hillingdon. I'm not saying those pressures are not significant for that local authority. They clearly are, but the pressures are significant on port authorities where we are seeing significant UK nationals arrive in volumes that are very hard to predict.
Councillor Core, your follow-up?
Yeah. If we can look at, because it seems that agenda item 6, part of it is connected to agenda item 5, where it said that the number of temporary households. I think it was a February and March statement, and there was no change in that. So I just wanted to understand if there was no new person entering the temporary accommodation or no new people entering Heathrow at that point in time that needed temporary accommodation. How does that work? Because at one point they're just the same as the previous month, and you say that it's been happening since last year. It's on page 29. So February 25 and March 2025. So it says the households in temporary accommodation are the same. So there is no change in the number of households which are in temporary accommodation in that period of time. So does that mean no one arrived in Heathrow at that point in time, or did we not accommodate them, or where did they go?
So that will be a net position, and so it can depend on month on what accommodation one can access. So a significant number of those who present as homeless we're actually able to find alternative accommodation for them. Others may then be leaving temporary accommodation, and those that are flowing in simply match the numbers or thereabouts. So I think it can vary from month to month. So as I said, last month we saw 40 households, completely unforeseen, unexpected, present to the council, which is significant for us, and actually represents, in some cases, a full month of new admissions into temporary accommodation, which we received in 1 week. So it ebbs and flows is probably the simple answer, but it can ebb and flow depending upon demand and the new supply and the pipeline supply of housing that comes through. So in other words, the numbers you have here are almost a function of lots of different things that are happening at any one time in any one month.
Councillor Batts.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that, of course, temporary accommodation seems to be one of the key considerations here. How will the price cap on nightly placements be enforced in practice without providers sort of exiting the market? And what is the contingency if they do?
Thank you. So the update on the price cap is that we've had a lot of success, actually. We've managed to implement the cap a lot faster, pretty much completed the full implementation of the cap by the end of August, which means that we successfully negotiated with all of the landlords to lower the maximum prices to an agreed and consistent level according to different bed sizes. And in answer to your question, there were so typically we have sort of 10 or so any one time temporary accommodation providers, and one or two of those actually said, look, this isn't for us, but other providers did step into that gap, and we then phased out in a transitioned way those providers which didn't agree to the maximum ceiling price we would pay for temporary accommodation. And we're now continuing to work with those existing providers to negotiate further, and also to kind of, what they're looking for, a lot of providers, is security in the business that we offer them, and we're looking for security in quality and cost. So, and we are clearly blue chip and good payers when it comes, so we are good for business, and that's what a lot of landlords, professional business, portfolio landlords are looking for from us, is security.
Councillor Batt, do you have a supplementary? Okay. Councillor Gaelic?
Thank you, Chair. I just need clarification. On page 12, it's mentioned that with transformation activity underway, it is predicted that we'll be using 1 million of capital receipts. Is it, do you mean by that assets sold? That's why we received those capital receipts? Oh.
Yeah, that's correct. So capital receipts are from disposals of assets. Under government regulations, you can use that to fund transformation activity where you're generating a saving for the council.
Yes, you're
Are you able to tell us what those assets were?
So the council holds capital receipts reserve. So that's been built up over multiple years. So when you draw down from that, you don't necessarily draw down an asset, you draw down kind of from the balance. So the history goes back a long way. So when you look in the statement of accounts, don't quote me on this, but it's something like 40 million sat in the capital receipts reserve. Most of that's within the HRA, some within the general fund, and then we obviously utilise that in line with financial regulations where it can be spent. So it's not a number that you'd want to just draw a list against because it's kind of fluctuating and built up over the years.
Thank you.
Councillor Gohill.
Thanks, Chair. I was hoping to get a bit of, back to trade waste collection, I was hoping to get a bit of clarity on that. Are we statutorily obliged to provide trade waste collection? And I'll explain the reason why I ask. Because if we're not sorry, my words, you know what I'm trying to say, if we're not obliged, and we're not making any money on it, are we really providing a good service that is a good use of money, of our residents' money? And I appreciate we're sort of teetering on the edge. We could probably draw it back and, like you said, be a bit more agile, which I would 100% look at, given that we've probably invested funds in setting this up. But if it weren't to improve, and it's not an obligation of ours, is that something that we could just look at? Because at the end of the day, we're looking at bringing residents value for money, and if that isn't providing value for money, I think it should be visited. If not, and if the private market does it better, sometimes you've got to let the private market do it better.
So I'd just like to provide some clarity on the report. So the report says that the budget is under pressure, not that we don't generate a surplus. So our turn 24-25, we generated 1.3 million from trade waste. So we are making money from it. It's just we are pushing ourselves to obviously maximise the opportunities in that space, and sometimes there's a budget shortfall, but we do make money from it.
It's the target that's under pressure, not, as Annie said, it's the surplus that we are making. And in many respects, the cost of running the trade waste service is marginal, so it's actually almost like a bonus to us.
I didn't read like that to me, so thank you for clarifying that. I do have a second question, and this is about the overspend in housing, and I was just wondering if you could share a bit more information about what kind of cross-borough collaborations or cross-authority collaborations, if it's out of London, or maybe private sector partnerships, etc. That options that have been explored essentially to try and bring our costs down, essentially.
I mean, one of the significant pressures which all housing directors in London and nationally are lobbying very hard on is that there is fair funding from government for both the local authority, but also around the benefit rates which are paid for households who live in temporary accommodation, which are very, very low. And the kind of prediction in London is that there's 270 million shortfall, I think it is the latest estimate in terms of this year's underfunding for temporary accommodation. So there's a sort of lobbying aspect as well. But we also work together in London and sub-regionally to look at procurement schemes for temporary accommodation. So in London in particular, there's collaborative working around standards, but also around costs. So that what we've agreed so that a key risk is that different boroughs will outcompete one another, and in everyday language push up prices for temporary accommodation, where we've agreed a consistent rate that we'll offer landlords as well. So that collaboration around price in particular is where we're very strong.
Thank you. I'll invite more questions, but I would appreciate if you can indicate now, because I'm going to close it after that and go on to the next item. So Councillor Kaur, Councillor Davis, anyone else before? Okay, so Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I'm interested in the temporary accommodation strategy. What sort of percentage are we at with that, and where are we? Because I believe that's only recently been introduced in the last couple of years. So I'd be interested to see what the drawback is and how we're driving forward with that.
So the strategy was agreed by Cabinet in February, and we'd set out a whole range of different targets across those 4 work streams. We have made quite considerable progress in reducing the number of new households placed into temporary accommodation. So we set a target of no more than 50 being placed into temporary accommodation from the 1st of April, and in the first 5 months we've achieved an average of 55, and that has come down from 62 on average last year. So in other words, a reduction by an average of 7 a month. So that's good progress. We're on track with procuring an increase in the number of private rented sector properties, which we use to avoid placement into temporary accommodation or move on from temporary accommodation for households where that's the right pathway. I mentioned the rate cap, so we've dropped, which was really a whole plethora of different prices, high prices across providers for spot purchase, temporary accommodation. So we've introduced controls. We've completed that within 5 months instead of a full 12 over the course of the year. Where we've experienced challenges is that demand still remains relentless, particularly from private sector landlords who are evicting, and I've mentioned more recently the sort of spikes that we've seen from those who are arriving in the UK. And the other challenges I mentioned, I touched on earlier, was the challenges in securing sufficient supply around leased accommodation, where there is not a shortage of schemes on offer. Particularly, they tend to be private house builders who are looking to lease an entire block of flats, brand new block of flats to us. But the prices that we've been offered them are just not competitive relative to other prices that we would pay in the market. And so what I'm particularly looking for is a real kind of spike in new supply, rather than that trickle case by case, property by property. That will give me sort of some step down change that I need to try and reduce temporary accommodation numbers. And that's where we're really incurring significant costs, is the kind of high number and creeping number of households here in higher cost temporary accommodation, for which we're struggling to find speedy alternatives.
Councillor Davis, your follow-up? No. Councillor Core?
Thank you, Chair. It mentions that the shortfall against the Green Gardenway subscription fee of 0.8 million. But when we looked at the consultations and the results of it, did we not know it was coming? Because most of the people who responded to the consultations said exactly that, or perhaps worse. So why did we not account for that when we were putting this in place?
I mean, it can always obviously be very challenging to set a really accurate target for a completely new initiative. And we did look outside the borough. I mean, this is charging or introducing a subscription waste service for green waste services is common across many boroughs, including West London. And so, whilst we did our very best to draw on the kind of experience and benchmarking of others, it obviously can be difficult to be precise in the take-up. We're confident that the take-up will continue, and the achievement of 1.6 million in subscription income is actually a real success, given that it went live partway through the year. So we're confident. We're not even a full 12 months clearly into that scheme yet. So it's one that we need to keep under review, and obviously listen to residents and what works for residents.
Councillor Cole?
Yeah. In terms of underspends, our underspends are in operational asset activities like repairs, caretaking and ground maintenance, and vacancies. So it looks like all our savings are coming from either not employing people or not doing the jobs you're supposed to do. And if we could get the details of where these vacancies were, it would be helpful to see how it relates to the services that are being affected in the front line. Thank you.
We can provide further information on vacancies. I should add that the underspends or reduction, the underspends in repairs relate to lower levels of repairs needed on our landlord housing service, which is in many respects a very good news story, because it reflects that we are investing heavily to improve our homes. So, for example, we've seen a significant reduction in the need for gas boiler repairs from our tenants because we've been accelerating the replacement of gas boilers to improved energy efficiency properties. And in relation to repairs, the regulator of social housing commented favourably about our housing repair service and how responsive we were. So I think it's important in terms of the presentation, I suppose, is to look at how investment relates to revenue or running cost, everyday day-to-day costs. So, and in terms of vacancies, we constantly keep under review the need to recruit to critical frontline services. And where we're reviewing services or we can see a change coming, then we might pause or just take a different approach, particularly if there's short-term spikes in demand. Rather than recruit permanently, we may mobilise staff from different parts of the business to address a particular issue, and then review more fundamentally what we might need in terms of staffing and structures going forward.
Thank you very much. That concludes this item, so thank you to the officers for your answers this evening. In addition to any comments and questions raised this evening, I would just refer members back to the recommendation on page 11, which is to note the contents of the budget monitoring position, month 5, which I believe we've done, so we will now move on to the next item, which is item 6. The officer may leave they wish to do so. Item 6, the annual performance report, pages 19 to 56, and we have Ian with us this evening. Where is he? Ian, hello, good evening. There'll be no presentation required. We'll go straight to questions on this, so I'll invite questions from members. Please, Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for joining us this evening. I just have a quick question about the report. There's a section that says that highlights 245 new council properties, but also in the report it talks about the right to buy losses. I just wanted to know if the 245 houses was like a net figure, i.e. is that the figure of new council properties we have after we've taken into account any right to buy losses?
It's a sort of gross new acquisitions figure, but you're right. I mean, we had a real spike in right to buy applications when the scheme was, or the discount was significantly reduced. And like all local authority housing landlords who experience such a spike, we're kind of working our way through those in accordance with statutory. Difficult to know exactly whether all of those applications will actually convert.
Any follow-up? No. Okay. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go to the bane of a lot of people's lives, a lot of residents, is waste. So the report does refer to not taking the statistics in isolation. I get that. However, I am also very aware that fly tipping incidents are underreported. Speaking with officers and get information I got from members' inquiries and so forth. For example, the cage trucks go around areas and they collect the waste that they see. They originally were supposed to be documenting or tapping to little tablets or whatever in their cabs where they've got a reasonably sized fly tip. That isn't happening. I don't think they've got the capacity to do that anymore. So my concern is that while we're sort of mid-range, we are statistically missing a lot of data about fly tipping. So I just want to sort of put that out there. But it's really what are we doing to try and capture this data? I mean, we've got residents reporting it, council members are reporting it, but there is this huge gap of stuff because we know that cage trucks are going around, waste collection is happening, but that the incidents are not being collected.
I mean, certainly it's something that we've really promoted through all of our communication channels, Hillingdon People, our social media, and the sort of monthly newsletter to residents, electronic email newsletter to residents that if they see fly tipping and to report it. And in general, I mean, we are clearly under pressure with fly tipping incidents. which do seem to be on the rise, like many local authorities. But we do offer, that responsive collection service, waste weekends as well, and sort of bulky waste collection. So it's about really understanding what the source or cause of that fly tipping is, and we are in hotspot areas or persistent fly tipping reported areas, undertaking action days with community groups and businesses to really engage and promote those services in those areas as well, so that we have a blended approach. I think importantly as well, it's about reaching out to those who may not have bins readily available in some flatted developments in the borough, to make sure that they know where they can take their waste. And obviously we've got the accessible civic community site as well in the borough. So there are lots and lots of avenues and opportunities for residents to either report or dispose of their waste in through the proper channels. But it's actually about taking a very targeted approach in those areas now, where we're looking to step up and reach out to communities, to businesses, to really understand why and to see what more we can do and to guide residents on the responsible disposal of waste.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I was out on Action Day on Monday with officers, and I commend the work that they're doing, but it is unfortunately seeming like a losing battle all the time, because the area that we were in on Monday, residents are saying, they clear it, and it's back the next day. It's just, and it ends up being daily waste collections is what's happening now. It's not a good sign. I also want to ask you about recycling. Again, from contact and discussing with the officers and so forth, I'm curious whether or not the aspect of the tonnage of waste. So when you recycle something and it's dirty, it then ends up in general waste and then is disposed of, as I understand it. Do we know what the proportion of that tonnage is relating to contaminated recycling? Because I've seen on documentaries on TV that certain providers, the cell gets picked up and gets washed and it's processed. I understand that isn't happening with the provider that we use as a council, and as a result, one piece of contaminated rubbish wipes out all the recycling that's in a bag, and it ends up being part of the fly tip that gets left. So I'm wondering what proportion, you've got the data available, the proportion of household waste that is general actually is made up of contaminated recycling waste.
I would need to just get some figures on that and then come back to committee.
Councillor Batt?
Thank you, Chair. My question was about data quality. So on data quality, ahead of the LGOF go live in April 26, which resident services data sets have had audits completed, and sort of what error rates were found, if any, and if any, what was the sort of remediation plan?
I wouldn't have the numbers to hand on those exact, so I'd need to come back to you. But what we do have in place is data quality reporting for lots of the areas for the officers to look at. A lot of the data that you're looking from LGOF as well goes through, without getting too technical, it goes through data standardisation and normalisation processes, which is what you're seeing in this report on the combined data sets, to make sure everything's to help improve the quality of that data that comes through.
Any follow-up, Councillor Batt? Councillor Kaur?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of weed overgrowth, it says our service requests are down, and then it says it is most requests this year focused on overgrowth and weeds, but overall decline points to more effective maintenance and positive outcomes for residents. Interestingly, that's not the feedback that I get from the residents. It's not the feedback from my side of the borough at all. And when I asked people about this, and they said people don't report stuff because they either can't, due to it being made too difficult to report, or when they do report stuff, nothing gets done. So people simply don't report stuff. Why waste time and energy? And this is the standard response that I've got from a lot of people. It's not that due to positive outcomes from residents by any means that I've heard from the feedback that I've had from residents. So I don't know where you get this from.
I mean, in terms of the feedback we do receive, I mean, it's obviously a mixture. And in terms of weed control, we've made a lot of changes. Particularly, you'll have seen our new sweepers that we've got, which now means that we can deploy those to actually very quickly and responsively address sort of whether it be weed control or detritus on the road or pavements. And obviously they're fairly new, but we're getting some very positive feedback about those new sweepers from our residents and how quickly they've been deployed.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you. And on another note, where it says the local plan is currently being refreshed and the Directorate is actively engaging with local businesses to drive inward investment. When the local plan, it says, is being refreshed, what does that mean? Because in previous document, there was a 193K cost to it. And if you're just refreshing it, why is it costing too much? But if you're, or what does it entail to actually say those costs, to justify those costs?
I'm going to refer to the Director of Planning and Sustainable Growth, who's been leading on this process.
Yes, so refresh, the other word for it is a review. A review is a process that's statutorily required a minimum of every 5 years. We have to go in, review the local plan, decide if the policies are up to date, and if they're considered out of date, then we need to commence a full review, which is what we've done. We've got a local development scheme that's published, that's been through Cabinet and I think full council, that sets out the timeline for that, and there's various statutory stages we have to go through. So there's been an initial consultation that's under Regulation 18, we call it, but that's a call for views, and we did that earlier this year. And then there should be a next stage, which is a draft plan, which is the kind of next stage to go through. So the work that goes into that, the reason there's costs associated with it is we have to produce evidence. So things that we have to produce is, what is our housing need? So kind of we've got a housing target that's related to capacity, but we also have to address kind of what need and mix and type of housing do we need. We have to look at our employment land capacity, what land for employment do we need to. We have to identify sites, analyse how much housing they could deliver. There's a whole kind of formula that goes into that. We're having to do a green belt review following the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework last December. So we've had to commission a borough-wide green belt review. It's the first time that's been done in over 30 years. So there's a whole series of work that has to be commissioned and done, and that's what the 193, we have a sort of budget that goes into that.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I have a question on ASB. It seems to be growing really, really high. At one point we're the highest in London with like 600 incidents a month. What is triggering this? Is it because we're better at capturing data with online social media posting that we now take, the online portal, etc., or is this something that we're losing control of? I'm looking at Richard, sorry.
That's fine. That's why I'm here. So one of the reasons for the growth, we think, is that over the last few years we have made it a lot easier to report. The online reporting tool, when that was introduced, the forms, that we started to see a steady increase. The 600 reports a month are not all of those. Well, firstly, that ASB is a broad term for those. That includes environmental issues like abandoned vehicles and other matters. So it's not person-to-person antisocial behaviour as such. It could be a very broad spectrum. And the 600 a month includes a lot that are either misreported, misdirected, or unactionable. So it ends up we have about half of those, probably about 300 a month, that end up in an actionable case that we can take forward. In common with lots of areas, I think we are seeing, and we have seen, growth, but a lot of the growth is not necessarily down to the situation getting worse. It's people reporting more and finding it easier to report.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I was reading online that there also seems to be a large amount of ASB with private housing associations, especially where I'm in my part of the borough. How are we as a council and local authority liaising with the private sector, so we call it, the housing associations, the private landlords? How are we doing that? Have we got a plan for that? Is that something we have a plan for?
So in terms of my team's role, that is very case-based. So clearly where there is antisocial behaviour which holds a social landlord, we would work with that landlord. We would make sure they take a lead, because primarily it does depend on the impacts, but if it's a tenant of a social housing provider and it's their behaviour impacting on other tenants, then that is the responsibility of that provider to resolve. So we don't just ignore it. We will make sure they're aware of it. We'll make sure they're taking adequate action. But primarily, we're looking at them to take the lead, unless for whatever reason we're unsatisfied with that. We don't have a broader program of engagement around antisocial behaviour with those providers. In my team's area, it is about case by case work to make sure the right body is taking action to resolve each issue as they come through.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gaelic.
Thank you, Chair. My question refers back to LGOF. Just wanted to know if our IT systems are sort of prepared to integrate with the framework, or will we need some upgrades? And secondary question is, how will the residents be able to understand the information published there? Will there be other information other than the list of statistics for them to see?
So for the first part of the question, our IT systems, they're not bespoke necessarily to what LGOF want. So different systems produce different outputs, but looking, and a lot of the information currently on the performance framework is already captured through our systems anyway, and we complete the returns through those. So I don't think there'll be any change there. That being said, there could potentially, the information hasn't been finally confirmed yet as to what is being captured, and if there is any new metrics or data outcomes that they want, then that could be subject to change. But currently at the minute we won't have a problem with that. The second part, from the outcomes of those frameworks from the LGOF would be, it's generally free information anyway, so it's available through multiple sources that residents could have, because that's the way that the data is normalised and captured. So it becomes freely available information from that. But I think from a business intelligence point of view, we have the kind of the initial thoughts to try and present as much data to the resident as we can for transparency as well.
Councillor Gaelic, you have a follow-up? I have Councillor Gohill next. Is there anyone else wishing to ask questions before I close the item? Councillor Course, Parley, anyone else this side? Okay. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. On page 21, it refers to the Hillingdon Takeoff Conference. They brought together 100 new businesses, which I thought was great when I read that. I was just wondering, off the back of that, has there been any kind of cross-collaboration between your departments? Have those businesses who attended been asked to comment on the Uxbridge transformation, Uxbridge regeneration, whatever you might want to call it? And if not, will that be followed up or pursued?
Did you want to come in on the sort of business events that we're holding, and then how we're sort of continuing to engage with businesses?
Yeah. So we held our first investor conference back in February of this year, where we had over 120 local businesses come to talk about investment opportunities in the borough and to start that kind of network. And then we've received funding through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. This is the last year of that fund at the moment, so unfortunately that money will run out in March, but through that we've been able to deliver a programme of business support. We've been funding the local Chamber of Commerce to deliver those programmes alongside other organisations who've been trying to connect local businesses into the kind of local supply chain with Heathrow and other big businesses. So we're rolling out a programme of activity, and then obviously the work we've done on the Uxbridge Vision, we're continuing that through a series of, we've got some UK SPF funded projects in the town centre that we have to deliver by March, which are hoping to drive footfall through the town centre and kind of uplift environment. We're also looking at whether we've just secured planning application that went through CULT, an innovation hub, which will be the first in the borough for start-up businesses, but we're looking whether we can forward fund with the Chamber of Commerce and Brunel a facility within Uxbridge to kind of seed that when it's delivered by the developer. So we're trying to get into that space. We've also started work on a growth plan for the borough, which is looking at what our economic challenges are and how we can look to address those. So that's looking to go to Cabinet in February at the moment. We're just at the baseline stage and gathering evidence, and that will look to see what our economic priorities moving forward are. So there's been a lot of work in that space over the last 2 years to support business.
Thanks. I do understand our lovely Mayor of London and government decided to take away our UK SBF funding from the next financial year, which is not great. But just in terms of what we can do to continue to push that growth from the borough. A few months ago, I can't remember which resident service meeting it was, but we had Heathrow here, and one of the things we talked about when Heathrow were here were some of the local projects that they could be funding. And so I was wondering if they had, and one of the questions I'd actually asked within that meeting as well was if officers could talk with Heathrow and kind of pursue these a bit more. And I wonder if that option's been considered, and if not, will it be considered? Because I think they could be quite a good tool alongside Brunel, alongside local businesses, to kind of push growth in the local area and just kind of squeeze like a bit more out of them, especially considering the impact that they have on our borough.
Yes. And I agree with you. I think there's an imperative there, given the impact on the borough. So we have actually organised a roundtable summit with Heathrow. They're coming in, their various different sort of areas of their business to come and talk to. So they've got the Heathrow Academy, they do their own supply chain work. So we're trying to take more of a leadership role as local authority at pointing that resource at the areas that we want to prioritise and kind of drive that agenda. So yeah, they've been receptive to those conversations, and we've started that conversation.
Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of recycling and waste data, where we are at the London average or below or better, are these annual data? How have we done, like, over the years? Has it gone any better or worse over time? And if that's the case, what are the strategies that we are putting in place so that our green targets, if any, are met?
Thank you. That's a good question. Over the last few years, we have continued to increase our recycling rates, and there's been a number of initiatives in recent years to reduce the overall amount of waste that households are disposing. So, for example, there's less packaging now, working with suppliers, and therefore the proportion of that which goes to landfill obviously is reducing as well. So, and that's a national and London trend, and one which is reflected in Hillingdon. In terms of what we're doing locally, we are engaging very positively and actively with households, and so a particularly significant initiative in recent years in Hillingdon has been the introduction of food waste collection, the segregation of food waste as well, which costs considerably less to dispose of than say waste which goes to landfill. And so we're actively running campaigns to encourage and work with households to increase their recycling, and particularly to participate in the food waste scheme. And we continue to do so and run a number of initiatives and campaigns to support and encourage our residents to do so.
Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of fly tipping, we've previously, in previous reports, we've heard that we haven't issued many FPNs relating to fly tipping. Are we planning to improve the use of our CCTV system, AI, include that, incorporate sometime in future?
We do. We have a number of cameras at CCTV or ASB hotspots we've used in the past. I can recall mobile cameras which we used to move about different parts of the borough. The challenge we have with CCTV evidence is that it isn't always possible to identify the individuals or even the vehicles from images if, for example, the individual has concealed their identity in some way or even that of the vehicle. But we do work with the police, and obviously we have our own teams at hotspots as well on particular sort of targeted action days and events. So, but it can be challenging. But I can assure committee that where we do have sufficient and robust evidence, we do not hesitate to bring to justice those who do fly tip and dispose of their waste irresponsibly.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Sticking with the recycling again, back to my previous line of questioning on the supplier for the recycling. So, as I know, the supplier does not provide the cleansing service, or the council hasn't opted into that service. I don't know which it is. What kind of distinction or differential do you make between what it would cost to complete that service and therefore enabling us to increase recycling across the borough versus not doing that, and then the contamination that, you know, one thing contaminates a load of waste and it all goes into general.
Certainly we can bring back to committee some further information in terms of our approach to managing or certainly reducing the contamination. So again, it's about that kind of cleansing and that segregation. But I can bring back to the committee further information about contamination rates and how we respond to that.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
I'm happy to give away. I won't ask at the moment. I'm fine, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Farr, did I give you a supplementary?
You didn't.
My mistake, sorry.
Okay, don't worry. Just following on from what Councillor Davis was talking about with the ASB, again, I mean, it's understanding what is actually within that. So it's mentioned that it's down to 300 a month. Because to know precisely what the proportion is of different types of ASB. One thing I am also aware of is that, again, it's linked in with waste, lovely topic, that the reporting mechanism for a resident to report waste, usually they just it's waste. So if they've observed the person doing it, because it's the option, it's waste. They don't go into antisocial behaviour and then log it in that way. Is anything being done to look at the reporting methodology in terms of the website and whatnot to either tack it on from the waste option or the fly tipping option so it tags on to ASB or something that makes it more easier for a resident to distinguish it, because it's not, from what I understand, is a lot of it's just going waste and it's just being collected and the ticket's being closed. So it's not actually being followed through to any particular a conclusion. I know you've got the sort of the thing that says on there that you can do it anonymously and whatever, but it's not immediately obvious from what I've spoken with residents about it. So anything we can do to enhance the ability for residents to, you know, go straight away, you know, I know who's done this, and report it.
Certainly residents can report it through the usual web tools, and obviously if they do provide us with details of who they believe has been, for example, fly tipping, then we'd obviously treat that confidentially, and we would have to ensure that any follow-up action with that alleged individual, that we had sufficient evidence, it met an evidential threshold in order for us to be able to take action. So if we're looking to issue, for example, a PCN, a penalty charge notice, then we would need a level of evidence. So we would, for example, search evidence to see if there was the fly tip, to see if there was any evidence of identification in that fly tip for the individual as well.
So Ian, did you indicate?
Sorry, just in terms of your answer for the resident, in terms of reporting, we have got a new system coming in place that will help with that. that's been used by some of the other councils with really positive results. I don't know the full ins and outs of the detail of it, but I've seen the trial of it, and it's very much, whilst I do appreciate not all of our residents are digital based or have a mobile phone, it's take a photo and then it kind of geolocates where that image is as well, and I think there's AI built in as well around helping with the identifying and classification of that. It will also give us stronger analytics, for example, of this kind of reporting as well as we go through that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been mentioned a couple of times about contamination of waste bags, and I'd just probably like to highlight the fact I went on a site visit to Edmonton, I think it was early this year or maybe last year, and I spoke to the staff at the centre, and surprisingly actually Hillingdon's done very well for contamination. It's very low in comparison to the amount of waste we take in. The main challenge actually at the time when I spoke to them was the dangers of lithium batteries and things like that, and I think it actually cost our fleet one of their vehicles in recent years because there was a potential fire in that vehicle, which was contained and handled very well by the staff, but that was one of the challenges. But I would just say the option to visit this centre is always available if you wanted to in the near future. I know members weren't available at the time. I think I was the only one who did attend, but the option is there in the future. If you wish to go, I would highly recommend you do so. It's a very informative session, and it'll give you a very first-hand insight as to how we deal with waste here in Hillingdon. Okay, so that also concludes the item for this. We again will note the report, and also that this will indeed be presented to full council, I believe, in November. Is that correct, Liz? I believe so. So with that said, we'll move on to our next item, which is item 7, the footway parking in priority areas phase 1. Our witness session, pages 57 to 84. And we have a number of officers present this evening. We've got Steve, Freddie, Jazz and Richard. I believe, Steve, you'll be leading on this item, so whenever you're ready, please proceed with your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was a lot of information provided at the last committee meeting, and I'd just like to thank you for the list of roads that you've identified as phase 1 for review. Perhaps if it's okay with you, I'd like to just run through them in the order and our initial officers' findings. So if we start at Botwell Common Road, I think most of the issues appear to be between Botwell Lane and Badgers Close, where most of the footway parking takes place. There are some other parts of the road where officers have witnessed some footway parking, but obviously there are lay-bys in Botwell Common Road that tend to be full and aren't managed through a permit system. Clifton Gardens, we've had a look at Clifton Gardens. There seems to be a lot of drop curbs along the road, and from our observations it seems that during the evening residents tend to park across their own drop curbs, only because that there isn't a lot of space in between the drop curbs to park fully on the footway. And of course, if we were to formalise a scheme in this road, then that option would be taken away from residents, so the capacity would be severely reduced. And as a desktop exercise, we worked out there could be as little as between 6 and 10 spaces left on Clifton Gardens if we were to formalise a footway parking scheme here. Windsor Avenue, I shared some results of a previous consultation with your chair. I don't know if it's gone to the committee, about a consultation we did on a possible formalised footway parking scheme in Windsor Avenue. Although it was some years ago, I think the responses were quite telling. We had a response rate of 31%, and of the 31% of residents who returned their questionnaire, 30% said they would support a formal footway parking scheme, and 70% said they wouldn't. So unless things have changed significantly in Windsor Avenue and there's a change of feeling, then I suspect that we probably get similar results again. Moving on to Ryfield Avenue, the long lane end of the road, it would be possible, I think, to look at possible formalised footway parking scheme, but the further away from Long Lane you get, the more complex it appears to be, with a lot more drop curbs, and of course also the shopping parade on Ryfield Avenue, where obviously parking is managed. If we move on to Colin Green Road, the good news is that can come off the list, because now that has controlled parking along the length of the road, so there should be no footway parking taking place. The same can be said of Windsor Close in Northwood. That has a parking management scheme now, and indeed that's proved to be successful, and in fact the residents there are encouraging the council to extend the times it operates, so it seems to be a good news story. Wood End Green Road, there are quite a significant lengths of single yellow lines and double yellow lines along on the road, and I think that there are some opportunities for some formal footway parking. I think a lot of the issues are about illegal parking behind the yellow lines on the footway and in grass verges. So effectively, footway parking isn't allowed in these areas. I think people just choose to park there knowingly, unlawfully. And the last one on the list, Chair, is North Road. The north part of North Road, between Porters Way and Thornton Avenue, officers have developed a parking management scheme for that section of the road that was requested through a petition by residents, and that is ready to go and implemented as soon as funding could be identified to implement it. South of Thornton Avenue, the residents were much against any formalisation of parking, whether that be on the footway or as parking management scheme. So I think obviously there's sort of quite a long road, and there is a split of opinion on that road. So that kind of summarises the roads that were on the list.
Thank you. I have a couple of points on those roads. Obviously I was not involved in all of them, but I've got some knowledge on some. Clifton Gardens, firstly, I'm aware there's a petition that's just been submitted on that in the last few weeks, so it'd be interesting to keep an eye on that to see how that one progresses. Windsor Avenue, yes, I do recall that. That was some 10, maybe 12 years ago. And I remember at the time, without sort of judging residents, there was a lot of confusion as to what residents perceived as formalised parking. And indeed, the concerns I had, which I believe was proven, was that residents were instantly put off by the idea because they thought it was permit parking, not formalised parking, which is a very clear difference. And I think that persuaded a lot of residents to put in objections to it. So I'd be keen to look at that again in terms of what was sent out at the time, the questions that was mentioned on the consultation, and whether it was clearly set out in the consultation that there would be no plans to implement any paid service as part of this review. So that's my point on that. Colin Green and Windsor Close, you've said that the parking management schemes have been implemented on that. Was that recent, or was that in...
Windsor Close, well, both actually some years ago, and there is an amended list on the agenda item. We have reviewed all of the footway parking schemes across the borough, and there is a new definitive list that's included in this agenda item.
In which case that's concerning, because those two roads were actually down in a category on the list you provided to say that there was no formal scheme in place and was pending implementation, which indicates to me that officers are not routinely checking that list and keeping it refreshed. So I would be keen to look at that as a committee as to how often you're reviewing that list and keeping it live rather than outdated. Councillor Goyer? Just
on that point, Chair, can I request that 9 Elms Avenue is there in place of Colin Green Road, both of which are in my ward, and I specifically would request 9 Elms Avenue because we as a council just spent a lot of money resurfacing the pavement over there, only for a number of residents to then park directly over it almost instantly. And I've just looked at it on this, and it says that it was last reviewed on the 16th of November 1999, with the sort of description saying enforcement suspended pending installation of a formal scheme. Can I perhaps suggest that to the committee if the committee is minded?
I'm happy to agree that. I was 11 at the time when that was last looked at, so yes.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just
yes,
say
sorry,
that was a decision made by the parking subcommittee at the time, not when it was reviewed. Nobody here around this table were here at the time, so I'm sure these were done in the best intentions. So I can't really comment as to why that decision was made.
No, by all means, I wasn't singling out officers individually. I was merely observing the fact that there is no sort of process or system to routinely monitor it, because, as you say, it's people come and go through the staffing structure, and it's important that these documents remain live and up to date. And at the moment, that doesn't seem to be happening. Councillor Farley, did you indicate?
Thank you, Chair. I did add on, one that I requested was Wood and Green, my former ward, and North Road. It's good to hear that the residents have already come to a decision on the north end of North Road, particular issue with the estate across the other side of Porter's Way, which has caused a lot of problems for parking, generally speaking. So that's good that that's been resolved, or is on the way to being resolved. Wood and Green Road, the particular issue with that is the school and the allotment site and the pavement and the grass verge. I can't remember if I regaled the committee before with this, but before COVID, I think it was, or around about times of COVID, when I spent some time with parking enforcement outside the school, and the behaviour of parents. I mean, I got driven at. I was on the pavement, and the car drove at me to park on the pavement and make me move out of the way as a pedestrian. So you mentioned about illegal parking, which obviously that's what it is. I mean, on this instance as well, we had to call the police out because one of the parking enforcement officers was attacked. So I'm just curious as to what exactly you're talking about illegal parking. I wouldn't. What I'm looking for there is actually is possibly not to have any kind of in that section, certainly any kind of formalised on pavement parking, because it's just dangerous. It's dangerous for the children and for pedestrians. So that area, and then further along, I know we've got some different setup with the yellow lines to the so that would be to the east end where the housing is. There's yellow lines and things that are there. I know that particular area has got some sort of part on pavement parking available to it, even though you've got the yellow lines also that sort of extend a little bit beyond where the double yellow lines are. If my memory serves me correctly, it's been a while. But yeah, I mean that's one. I'm just to make sure that we are doing things because it is a school. The safety factor. I want to make sure that it's put into a. Yeah, it's my opinion anyway. That's particularly from a safety factor that we're not going to be looking at doing anything on that stretch by the allotments.
Yes, thank you. I mean, where historically there might have been a relaxation of footway parking enforcement, if the council subsequently introduce yellow lines, then where those yellow lines are, there is no longer any footway parking exemptions. We will enforce to the back of the footway, and those restrictions will apply to the back of the footway, and our colleagues in APCO will go out and enforce that. Certainly there is absolutely no intention to look at changing that and formalising any footway parking, certainly in the areas you introduced. I think what it was is the fact that people knowingly and choose to be, park illegally and also drive dangerously by the sound of it.
Councillor Farley, do you have anything further?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Davis?
So I'm just trying to get my head round how it's got so out of hand, really, with the roads. So I'm looking at some of these, and I know for a fact myself, because I've actually reported them last year and this year, and there's been no real change. So if a resident reports there's a problem with a yellow line, hours, or footway parking, etc., how many complaints do you have to get from a resident before you review it, or do you just wait for a petition or something like that to come in? For example, Church Road Hayes has got yellow lines during restricted times 2 days a week, because 15 years ago there used to be a car boot sale at Hayes Football Club, and now people are parking on Church Road and blocking traffic. I've put in complaints, and I know residents have, and there's still been no review on that. So I'm just trying to get my head around how proactive we are at reacting. Well, yeah, how reactive are we to residents' complaints, or do we wait for petitions to come in? There may be a nicer way to form that, and I'm sorry if it's come across rude.
No, not at all. I mean, if there's a road safety issue, then one complaint will be sufficient enough for us to investigate.
Yeah.
When we're talking about wholesale changes, introduction of maybe a formal footway parking scheme or a parking management scheme, then I think it's only right that the Cabinet member has some degree of reassurance that it's supported by the wider community and just not one or two residents, because it has a significant impact on the wider community and just not one or two people. But if it's a road safety matter, then there's no reason that we shouldn't look at it straight away. And we probably receive between 200 and 250 requests for road safety matters. They don't always result in additional yellow lines or parking restrictions. There could be other things that we can investigate. For example, people parking across drop curbs. You know, an excess white bar marking could be enough to deal with the problem. It's only a visual deterrent, but sometimes it has a desired effect. So yes, if there's a road safety issue, then the school travel and road safety team and the engineers will go and look at it.
Ms. Davis?
I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
If I could just go on the back of that. So, just for clarity, the list that we've got, it says suspended enforcement. So could you just give me a sort of example of an enforcement being suspended? So if you have someone parked against someone's drop curb and it's registered, is that parking ticket suspended? They can't issue the ticket because it's in a road that's got suspended enforcement. Is that correct?
Do you mean with footway parking or...?
Footway, anything on that list that says suspended enforcement, can you define suspended enforcement? What would categorise that as not being able to issue a ticket? So if a car parked fully on the footpath and that was in a road that was suspended, would they get a ticket?
Yeah, so the way that we will do parking enforcement is that we can do it as if there's signs and lines in a road, so if it's parked over a line or not where the vehicle should be in terms of the signs, and then we can issue a parking ticket for that. But then we have a few other schemes that are informal in nature as well, which do not have signs and lines indicating where on the footpath you can park. So then the exemption applies to the entire road, and that's when we can still carry out enforcement. So we still carry out enforcement on both.
Okay, so on Windsor Avenue, for example, if a car was to park fully on the pavement where there's no lines, no signage, they would not get a ticket?
It depends if it's a footway exempt location. So if it's not a footway exempt location, then we would carry enforcement. But it should only be with two wheels on the footpath. That is the exemption.
Okay. Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. My confusion with this is, would not have, like, if we have better enforcement anyway, like have more people enforcing a lot of the issues, resolve some of the issues that we get in these roads, rather than formally going for it. But if we needed to, all these roads, do they have the specific width? All these roads that are listed, they have the specific width that we need for footway parking enforcements?
I think it's two separate questions. I think, would we now allow footway parking some of these roads that are on the list? Probably not. Are there mechanisms in place for our colleagues to enforce them? Then clearly the best way to do that is to formalise a scheme. So without a formalised scheme, there are challenges about enforcement. I think there are a lot of instances that, you know, like I said, with the best intentions, the then parking subcommittee made decisions because there seemed to be a lot of petitions in a very short space of time. And I suspect this was probably pre-decriminalised parking, a lot of these in 1994 when parking was given to local authorities to enforce. And I suspect there probably wasn't the skills or the knowledge or the resources at the time to go out and inspect every site. So hence, we do have this rather long legacy. And the challenge is, of course, when you say to residents, if we formalise a scheme, which you've been used to since 1989, and we're going to remove half the parking in your road, how do you feel about it? And I'm sure I don't need to tell you what the answer is. So, yes, it's challenging, and you know, we have looked at some roads in the past, in 2016, as Chair alluded to, and unfortunately the response on all the roads wasn't very favourable, but we can review what was sent out and see if it was clear enough to residents.
Councillor Cole? Also, in addition to that, I think it would be worth looking at data from parking reports of for parking wardens to come out in those roads that we've selected, say in the last year or two. How many incidents have been reported, how many times were wardens called out, and how many tickets were issued. I think that data would help the committee, perhaps.
Sorry, Chair, just to follow up, one of the challenges that we had when we looked at the reports that my team get is that we actually received very few complaints from residents about footway parking. So it was helpful that the committee chose some roads, and you know, if there are any other suggestions, then we'd welcome them.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. The Chairman has stolen part of my question, but how much data do we capture from ABCOA regarding this? Because I know on a number of occasions I've called up to report an illegally parked vehicle parked on yellow line, and they've quoted to me, no, this road is the yellow line's active between 9 and 10. This road is, they can park on the pavement there. You're not capturing that data, because the people who are picking up the calls are saying, oh, there's nothing we can do there, thank you very much, hanging up. Are they logging them calls? Is every call that comes into ABCOA parking enforcement logged? So that's the first part of my question. Even if it's something that they cannot act upon, is it logged?
So every call that they get through the enforcement hotline should be logged of when it comes through. So we do have a log of that. They may not have a log of what the complaint was about, but every call is logged. So they know what is coming through.
Okay. Why do we not capture the data of every call? Because if Mrs. Brown is ringing up every single day about parking on Smith Street, and every day your officers are saying there's nothing we can do, surely there's a trend, because I know there was a trend of illegally parked vehicles, like purple parking in my ward, and I was ringing up and was told by the officers, there's nothing we can do, this scheme is, they can park there. We're not, if the officers are doing their job, or doing what they're told to do, then maybe there's a training need there to capture the information of every call, even if it's just a road, because that data for this committee would be needed to make, and for you guys. So if you're getting frequent calls about frequent roads but you can't action on it, there's got to be a way of storing that data somewhere.
I think that's a good question. I think we need to take that away and look at exactly what is logged and the detail they keep. We primarily ask them to log details of the action they're taking, number of calls, the time of response, the outcomes. So you're right, there may be a gap in the level of intelligence we can gain from when the people are calling, and as you describe, about things we can't action. We don't have that data at the moment, so that suggests me they're not routinely recording it. We'll take that away.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I was just thinking about witnesses, possible witnesses. I know some of these words well, but others I don't. Do we know which ones of these are on bus routes and what anything that's done changes might impact on public transport?
We have traffic liaison meetings with the emergency services, bus operators and Transport for London, and where bus routes are affected by parking issues, we have introduced yellow lines. We have sort of dealt with the issue, and trust me, TfL and the bus operators aren't backward in coming forward. We had a recent incident on Station Road where a bus route was being suspended, and whilst we were going through the legal process to introduce double yellow lines, we put a temporary traffic order in and put cones out to prevent people from parking, and the bus flows a lot better now. And actually the whole legal process to introduce the yellow lines is now, it's at final stage, and we're just waiting for the lines to be painted. So yeah, I mean, of course we react as quickly as we possibly can. I think it's important to say that we do get a lot of requests, and in instances where residents might phone up and there isn't action that APCOA can take, then certainly there are lots of avenues open to them to come to us, the Transport and Projects team, and I'm sure the Cabinet member will look at all the amount of things we take to him on a monthly basis for requests for yellow lines and other road safety measures to confirm that we are very active when it comes to dealing with the residents' concerns.
Councillor Farley, do you have a follow-up? Okay, Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. One of the things that sort of wasn't mentioned in the report, and I'm hoping the committee can kind of be maybe given early sight on, is how accessibility feedback is going to be captured and reflected in the final recommendations. Could anyone shed some light on that? That'd be great. Thank you.
I think it's important to get the Council's Principal Accessibility Officer involved, Ali Kashmiri, in any discussions we have.
Is he involved?
He will be, yeah. I think he could be a good witness.
So I have at what stage then will he be involved when we're going through this review, and will we be able to get an update at maybe the next meeting when this is brought in, because it's quite an important part of any review that we undertake as a committee.
I suppose the question is, in what form do you want the review to take place? I mean, are we looking? I mean, we've got a list of roads here, and I think it's unrealistic to expect that we can review every single road. So we've chosen some here as a first stage, and some have come off the list because we formalised schemes. I mean, the challenge is, of course, yes, there are accessibility issues, and you weigh that up against the demand for parking by residents. That's the challenge.
So to clarify, Chair, I think my comment was broadly around, if we are reviewing this as a whole, at which point are they going to be consulted? And I suppose you've partially answered that. If we're looking at a small number of roads, are we going to be consulting those with accessibility needs on those small number of roads before it's kind of rolled out as a whole? Or I mean, I guess that's not really my remit as a councillor to know at what point it's going to be introduced. My question was, at what point will it be introduced, and will it be introduced and fed back to us as a committee? Because ultimately, as a committee, we're signing off on this review.
So, just thinking about obviously the scope of the review, if we've got the selected roads, what may be appropriate would be, as Steve suggests, we take that away for a conversation with the accessibility officer, and we consider what we can do to answer the question in the scope, which is around does the parking arrangements as they currently are impact on people's ability to use the footpaths as appropriate. I think, if that's okay, Steve, we can ask that question and we can seek that input. That might require a site visit by the officer concerned, and any intelligence you've got to tell us where you think that may be an impact, because obviously a lot of footway parking doesn't impact on accessibility because the footpath's wide enough. But if there are particular locations that are of particular concern, then we will focus on those.
Thank you. And also just to remind members of the terms of reference on points 1 to 6, page 1, gives a bit of in-depth detail what we're looking at as a review. I would be very keen to hear the views of the schools. Windsor Avenue, which was on our suggested list, I know that's filled up my inbox a number of times over the years from Oak Farm School, who've raised concerns about traffic enforcement outside the school, particularly on the zebra crossings there. So engagement with governing bodies for schools, the heads of those schools. I'm not sure if any of the GP surgeries are falling within those rows that we've selected, but it might be beneficial to clarify on that. Shopping parades may be the Chambers of Commerce. I would perhaps suggest as a potential one we could look to get in for a witness session as well. Councillor Kaur.
Just request if it's possible to actually have road names by the new ward boundaries would be helpful.
I will work with our colleagues in the GIS team to try and work through that. Otherwise it will be a manual process and could take a long time.
Anyone else before we move on? Okay, anything from the officers?
Just one thing, Chair. I've just like to remind the committee, if you have residents that are concerned and would like to see formalised footway parking, whether that be with permits or without, then please encourage them to work with us and submit a petition.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my battery on my laptop's about to run out, but I think it was to more or less note the report, so I think we're happy with that. Thank you to the officers for their attendance. We'll move on now to our next item, which is item 8, the Draft Community Safety Strategy, pages 85 to 98. And we have Richard with us this evening, and there'll be no presentation, but we will go straight to questions from members if there are any. If so, please indicate now. I can see that. Go on. Questions are pending, Richard, if you bear with us. Councillor Kaur's rummaging through that paperwork quite aggressively.
Just in case I have something.
Councillor Batt, save the committee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, when will the IOM coordinator be in post and funded, and what happens to the governance procedure if recruitment slips at all in that space?
One of the discussions at the last Safe Hillingdon partnership was about how we fund that post. So we know we need it. It is a gap in our ability to have an integrated offender management board that we should have. Probation are currently looking at the detail of that, looking at how they operate elsewhere, and we'll bring back a proposal to our next meeting in common with some of the other aspects of the strategy and the supporting delivery plan. Capacity funding is going to limit the ability to deliver some areas, but we're setting out our ambitions and where we know we need to strengthen.
Anything further? Councillor Kaur.
Thank you so much, Chair. In a recent Safer Neighbourhoods team meeting that I went to, they had some suggestions about the roads or alleyways where they could do with lighting and stuff. So could we add that as part of the, which part of it would look at in terms of building more safe spaces or alleys and things like that?
Thank you. So we do get quite regularly either resident feedback or petitions around alleyways and lighting. They can be problematic because of limitations around privacy, light intrusion, costs related to things like mirrors, which persistently will get damaged and have to be replaced, and obviously sometimes barriers that could be put into alleyways to limit people riding bikes up them are actually a barrier to accessibility as well. What we have in the as part of our delivery plan, it's mentioned in the strategy, is something called the Hillingdon Enforcement Safety Panel, which is a new group we're setting up, and its primary focus is to look at where we think there are issues around locations that there are potential safety risks or improvements to be made. So those sort of resident requests will go to that group. That will be something they can look at. Currently our antisocial behaviour team will look at those requests anyway, but we'll do that as a more partnership approach with a view to being able to provide a stronger response. Not always able to satisfy the request, but we will look at it through that process.
Councillor Cole, any follow-up?
Yes, and another request from the Safer Neighbourhoods team was to look at the possibility of locking up green spaces again if we could, because some of it was giving rise to, not only fly tipping, but generally drug and related issues in green spaces.
Thank you. I'll take that back. Obviously that was a decision that was made earlier this year for various reasons by the Cabinet member, so I'll feed that back to the Cabinet member that's been discussed. Thank you.
Councillor Batt.
Thank you. I noticed that you proposed sort of two panels here, which is the Hillingdon Enforcement Safety Panel and the IOM panel. I'm just wondering what sort of hard targets are each sort of held to. So is it ASB hotspot sort of resolution times? Is it sort of regular repeat victimisation reduction or reoffending rates? And sort of what kind of target and baseline are you using to measure both?
So we're currently in the process of developing a new performance framework for antisocial behaviour. This is partly driven by the social housing regulator, which requires a range of performance indicators that we collect, which is primarily around things about how quickly we risk assess a case that comes in for antisocial behaviour, and includes things like satisfaction surveys and resolution as well. So that's work in progress, and I'm very happy. I know this committee has an antisocial behaviour review annually. I think at the next one we'll be able to talk through, these are the antisocial behaviour indicators we're collecting, this is how we're performing against those, which will be an improvement on where we've been before. So was there another aspect of that question, another group you mentioned?
No, it's just the IOM panel, but just looking at sort of what sort of the baseline sort of targets would be to measure the success rate for each panel.
Yes, so we haven't developed those for the IOM panel yet because the panel's not started. They'll be very much probation-led, and it'll obviously be around the sort of reduction of reoffending, which is a statutory duty we have. So we'll be looking at how we effectively measure how effective our approach is to reducing reoffending.
Any further questions? Councillor Gohill?
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of weeks ago, the Mayor of London announced that they're cutting a further 1,700 officer jobs in London, and also there were questions about front counters being closed across London, leaving only 2, which are functioning 24 hours a day. I was just wondering, given those announcements that have been made, what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on our community strategy, and have we taken into account the drastic impacts that's going to have on our residents?
So that's something that's obviously been discussed at a Safe Hillingdon partnership. It doesn't primarily impact on the strategy itself, which is what we want as a partnership, to get to a point where we have a very clear public strategy setting out priorities that reflects what residents are asking for, what the data says should be the priorities. The partnership will obviously, with police being a key partner, we'll be asking questions around what those reductions mean locally. I know I can't speak on behalf of the police, of course, but I know from the discussions I've had with them, they're working hard to make sure that the local changes don't impact on frontline policing. But obviously if there are any significant impacts, both the data set that we have at the partnership and the report the police bring to that partnership at each meeting will be used to make sure that we're understanding what those changes mean in practice and what we might see as an outcome. But I can't comment further than that on behalf of the police.
Anything further? Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of on the back of what Councillor Batt was talking about with KPIs, I mean, generally speaking, so each of these refers to outputs and outcomes, but they are a little bit indefined in any sort of meaningful sense that you can measure against them. You mentioned that, for example, the ASB, it refers to that exercise of reviewing ASB. I'm wondering whether or not there's somewhere in here that it can be referred to as these outputs, these KPIs, which are derived from X things such as the ASB review or whatever it might be, just so that it can be defined to understand what the measurements are that are being used against, because we all want crime rates to come down, but what are we measuring it against? And these things are a little bit lacking in sort of some of the substance I would have liked to have seen. Thank you.
So we are, as the paper says, the partnership will have a delivery plan sitting underneath it, which will include specific measures. And what I'd like to be able to do is bring those to this committee as part of the 6-monthly review of the performance of the partnership and the police updates that we have. So you'll be able to see those here. I don't think they'll probably sit in the strategy, but there'll be something we were working to develop, agree as a partnership, have as an active measure, a paper we review at every meeting, and we bring here for that oversight.
Councillor Farley, do you have anything further? Okay. I'm going to finish with Councillor Core, unless there's anyone else who's got a burning question to ask. No. In which case, Councillor Core, can you finish with your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check if the antisocial behaviour strategy could also include something specifically around tower blocks, because those are the major places where antisocial behaviour takes place. Police are aware of it, but they were also wondering if the partial closure orders that they had could be revived again as soon as they expire, because what has happened in some of the tower blocks is when those closure end, like there is a duration to that you get it through courts, and when they end, the ASB comes back very, very quickly. So if there was a process where you could have back-to-back, you're ready to go to the court to request those orders so that ASB doesn't drop to the same levels as before. If they could be part of, tower blocks could have specific part as part of the ASB strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll note that. I think that's a really good point, that we know that is a particular issue for where ASB is. I'll make sure that we take away to reflect in the strategy as part of the ASB that tower blocks is a particular focus, or communal areas in buildings similar to tower blocks, because that is a resident priority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? No. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Richard, for answering those questions. Again, I'd refer the members to pages 85. The recommendation is the Select Committee reviews the draft community safety strategy for the borough and comments on any matters it would like considered as the strategy finalised for approval by Cabinet. Unless there's any particular comments you wish to make, I would like to suggest that I liaise with the Labour lead outside of the meeting and we draft the comments through Democratic Services, if you're happy with that. Okay. Our next item is item 9, the infrastructure funding statement on pages 99 to 174. Julia, good evening, thank you for your patience. There will be no presentation on this item either, so we will go straight to questions as well. Councillor Cool smiling, I've just got one ready.
Thank you. Are we on target of getting all the monies that we were supposed to get in time? We don't want to lapse, the monies to lapse, and we have them when we need them for when we need them. Are we on target with that one? Thank you.
Yes, I have a monthly meeting with my team on monies that we've demanded the money and it hasn't been paid yet, and we chase that down, and we've got a process now with legal services in place that goes after that money. And then we do an annual review through our starts and completions exercise. We use council tax data to look at sites where we believe new developments have completed, and then we compare that to our data to catch sites, and we do that on a monthly basis as well. So we are out there monitoring the development that's going on and making sure that developers are telling us if they've started and checking that against whether they've got obligations to pay us.
Anything further?
Yes, thank you. Just to know that we are also spending those monies in time where we need to, because we don't want them to lapse either.
Yes, I have a list as well for anything that's within 18 months of deadline, and we have a monthly infrastructure meeting that goes through all those, and we do proactive plans put in place. But yes, we haven't reached a stage recently where one has lapsed. We've had a couple close on health that we've had to work with the NHS to get them over the line, but other than that, and sometimes we do go back to the developers to ask for an extension as well. So we have been doing that where we've had issues.
Councillor Gohill?
Thank you. My question's around SIL money, and I was just wondering how much of it, or do you know, maybe a percentage, if it's not a specific number, because I appreciate it is on the spot, maybe a percentage, a rough percentage of how much of our total SIL gets transferred to the GLA or TfL, and I was just wondering as well, off the back of that, if there's anything that we can do as a council to kind of retain a greater amount of the SIL money, or is that national government setting?
Yeah, they sort of operate under their own legislation. For the mayoral SIL, we're simply a collecting authority, whereas for our own SIL, we're a charging and collecting authority. So we can we collect an admin fee of 4% for the mayor's SIL, but everything else goes back to the mayor that we collect on his behalf. So in terms of the overall SIL proportion that we bring in, I would have to get back on that, but the raw figures are in the report just to show you the actual amount of money we've collected of mayoral SIL each year.
So just to clarify, my second part was, is there any way we can retain a bit more of that locally? I wonder when the last time the 4% figure for our collection has last time that was reviewed. Is it perhaps time to increase that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the maximum allowed under the SIL regulations, and at the moment, the mayor can only collect SIL, or the SIL collected by the mayor can only be spent on transport infrastructure. So there's a kind of ring fencing around that money as well.
And just for clarity, I think that question's been asked a number of times over the years by myself as well as others. Councillor, who we got? Councillor. I do have a list on it. Councillor Core, was it? No, Councillor Farley? There's one of you. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. We are, well, I asked the question, where are we with the updating the system that's been discussed at numerous sessions where we looked at this topic, to look at where funding has come from on Section 106 and what it's been spent on? Is there an update on the progress? How far back, or what's left to be done? Is it all done?
There is progress. I'll have to ask, I've got a colleague here who's working on it, how far back we've gone, but everything in the report we've got all the expenditure now that we're making each year is now going through our system, so that's accurate. All the money we're collecting each year is going through our system, so that's all in the appendix of the infrastructure funding statement. So anything that's current on our books, what we haven't done is we're sort of going back through things that were collected historically, spent historically, so we've got a formal record of it online. We do have all that information in paper files, but it's just bringing it out, so we're doing that, but it's a case of priorities in terms of the team are looking at trying to get the new money in and get the money spent, and then the extra capacity that they have goes through doing the backlog. But in terms of everything we currently hold, on SIL it's all on the system, and on Section 106, we're going through category by category, so most of the system is being reconciled, but not entirely. We still operate on a spreadsheet for an overall position on Section 106. It's not, the system isn't the single version of the truth at the moment.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. A little disappointing to hear that we don't appear to be much further than we have been. When I've been banging this with John for numerous years now at this committee and the equivalents that were before it. So again, it's this thing about understanding where Section 106 money comes from, so what particular project it was, which job it was, and how it's been spent, and that still, sadly, seems to be lacking. I mean, you mentioned some database that may be accessible, but again, I'm looking at this in terms of what we have done in the previous year, from that context, and understanding where the developments are and where the money is going, and that isn't obvious from this report.
It is listed in the appendix, I guess. It's done clause by clause, and it's a sort of written address. So in terms of the money we've received this year and the money we've spent this year, that is all in the appendix of the report. So if there's specific further information, one to the other.
Chair, that's what we've been promised before, is that this database that you're working on will allow us to get that information to know where Section 106 money has been generated, and where location, and from what project and location, and on what project has been spent on by the council. That's what we've been promised that we would be getting at some point.
I suppose we can produce that data for schemes probably delivered in the last 3 years, or maybe 4 years on the system. I guess that's not what this report is a statutory structure that we follow in terms of the inputs and outputs that are in. So if there's data outside that, we may well have that, be able to produce the data. It's just not, this report sets out clear sort of requirements of it, because it's a national data standard that we're following, basically.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Cole?
Just to follow up on Councillor Farley's point, I think what is the general consensus of the field, even when I went to one of the Friends of the Minute meeting, was that a lot of development is happening in Hayes and around those areas, like heavily developed areas, but we don't seem to see the effects of SIL or Section 106 especially being spent. If you're spending that money which is being generated from the developments within those areas, people are not aware of where they are, so they can't link to S106 coming from the developments in these areas which are heavily developed to see where it's going. So I think that's where the point was. Thank you.
So on SIL expenditure, that's determined by Cabinet each year. So I think the report sets out where basically the entire pot we've received, and then the report itself will tell you where that money is from. So I think the Appendix 1 says what money we've received in that year, and then Appendix 2 tells you where that money has been spent. The majority has been spent on the West Drayton Leisure Centre as a form of infrastructure. On SIL, yeah, it's an interesting point in terms of it, once the development's finished, going through and showing where the improvements have been. That's something I can take away and think about in terms of how we could make that more real in terms of presentation, so that if a particular improvement was agreed through the 106, has that been delivered in relation to that development? Yeah, okay, understood.
Thank you. If there be no other questions, I will close the item. Again, on the recommendations, in addition to noting it has asked for our comments. Is the committee happy to again allow myself and the Labour lead to perform the comments outside of the meeting? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Julia. Item 10 is the statement of licensing policy. Daniel, welcome. Again, thank you for your patience. We got a bonus this evening. We actually got the chairman of licensing here as well, so I suppose we can always defer to him if we can't get the answers. But there's no presentation. We'll go straight to questions as usual. If there are any, please indicate now. I've seriously got a question from the licensing chairman.
And what a better person to ask. So we've spoke about this, Daniel, already. I just want an update where we are with the consultation, really.
Yeah, I mean, the consultation closed on Monday. It's a 6-week consultation, and I think at the licensing committee I reported that there were 7 comments back. There are now 10. So our plugging in that last licensing only increased it by sort of... I mean, there's going to be a full report, obviously sent to full Cabinet on the 18th of December, but looking through those 10 in total, there was 3 from responsible authorities, so our antisocial behaviour team, our food, health and safety team, and our immigration team. But they were like minor, more about contact details, some helpful guidance, which we will definitely sort of like look at. The remaining 7, which came through our survey, if you like, because we worked with the customer engagement team. We've done really sort of well. We're going to present that in those findings. There was some useful comments about the information is not clear. That was, I don't know if there was problems clicking, if it was technical details, but I think from those ones from residents, they were mainly, and the concerns we talked about in our licensing committee were more of enforcement. That was the current theme, like similar to what we've heard today. You know, are officers going out there? How are we reacting to complaints? And I can say that in terms of changes to the licensing policy, that section on enforcement has remained untouched. That's a key one, like processing, like fees. That hasn't changed in any way, and so it always remains proactive inspections, carried out, risk-rated inspections, but where there are complaints, where there are referrals from our responsible authorities, we will get that out there quick and fast.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, I just want to say that the report is really well put out. For me, personally, I think a lot of time and effort that you guys have put in, so well done. And it's really good to see that there's modern clauses in there as well, like the Ask Angela. That's an amazing initiative. And also for locals, being a former publican myself, the agent of change principle is well needed. So just for the committee, the agent of change is basically if you move next to a pub or you build a development next to a pub, it is down to the developer to install soundproofing. So that pub could be there 200 years, all of a sudden a block of flats comes up next to it and the pub is expected to make them changes. It's really nice to see that the modernisation has been put in. So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for those kind comments, Chairman. And I think part of it is obviously us looking ahead as well, you know, as Chairman and others would be probably familiar with, that licensing tasking force was sort of like set up by the government, and so they're looking at ways of modernising it. And funnily enough, those two, when drafting, those 2 things are included in there. So stuff about vulnerability, safeguarding, stuff like agents of change is specifically mentioned in the recommendations. So it's nice to know that. I would like to sort of say, oh, I foresaw it. But like we're trying to keep in touch with what other boroughs are doing and what are the current themes, because a lot of the other boroughs also will be reviewing their licensing policy at the same time as us.
Can I just ask how it's compared to previous consultations you've done in terms of the turn up for the...
This one's slightly better.
Oh, good, okay.
I mean, it was. I think sometimes we've received only just 2 comments from the responsible authorities, but I think with, I think the customer engagement team and our web team, you know, all we can do is go through the process and make it self-available, and they come back with lovely charts, and which I'll include as annexes in the cabinet report. I would like to get more engagement. It's not like where, you know, I just sort of like, in each committee I just sort of say, if you're watching at YouTube, please put in your sort of comments, because we do really mean that, and every comment that's been put in, every comments which were made at the licensing and full hearing, we will make those changes. So there was a couple of really good points, and we'll be making those changes, as well as the residents ones that are coming in as well. If they want it slightly reworded, if they want it stronger or firm, we'll assess that, and we'll look at changing that, and we're not scared of doing that, actually.
I've certainly seen you making a push for the consultation. I've seen it on social media. I don't know if it was in Hillingdon People. Was it in there? I would assume so.
So thanks to our comms team as well. I mean, all I can say is that, you know, I think also legally the process is a very important part of the whole consultation, and so we don't want this 6 weeks where it's just quietly gone in there. We're actually going to all our stakeholders, all our responsible bodies, our neighbouring boroughs, and sort of saying, look, this is what we're doing. You know, there are some interesting sections in that, and more detail provided in areas such as children, that we've gone further and more in detail, just to provide clarity to people in the licensing trade, residents, but also for our committee as well. You know, the practical sort of solutions to where we've seen those problems in the last 5 years, where we can sort of iron out. There's certain things like, for example, planning. It was just a no-no sort of like discussion in licensing, but more and more through guidance and through cases that we've been seeing, it's having those reasonable, practical conversations about, oh, have they got planning, you know, and us not being silent on things that are just supposed to be put into the licensing forum. So we have tried to push.
Councillor Gohill?
Thanks. Just off the back of the Chair's comments, I understand that the licensing policy draft is kind of aligned with the Home Office and MOPAC, etc. But I was just wondering if there was any work that's been done maybe with Richard's Department of Community Safety, and whether like SNT had been involved, because they're usually like boots on the ground and that kind of like resident facing.
I would say we're boots on the ground as well.
Sorry, no, you are as well, and I echo.
I take your point. I mean, Richard is our director, and so I'm in mostly in those meetings, and you'll see that, for example, you'll see that in the section we've done with integration of strategies. We've mentioned stuff like I'm blanking now on it. But stuff like what he mentioned in his community sort of strategy, a priority of theirs is VOG, so violence against women and girls. And so we've included things such as spiking and Ask Angela, and that's no coincidence. But because we're in the same sort of meetings, we know what the priorities are for our partners, then they're getting implemented in our licensing policy. And we see that as just not a document in isolation. It should work with other things like, that's where I blanked, the PSPO as well, which was recently sort of done. So it would make reference to that as well.
Just suggesting there's a lot of SNT meetings coming up in the next 2 weeks or so. If you want to increase your engagement, it might be worth sending it through to either the police teams or the chairs of the SNTs, and just saying, well, for your residents who are popping along, if you could just maybe mention this and how they might want to get involved, your engagement might suddenly jump up.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that works two ways, and I think for us as well, it's now that we're a fully staffed team with about 9 officers, including me, it's us also to get out there as well. So I take your point. Thank you.
Any further, Councillor Core?
Yeah, just to commend on new additions like spiking and third-party contractors and Uber Eats and stuff like that. It's really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with there being no further questions, I think we can finish this item as well. The recommendation was to note it, but I did think it asked for comments as well. I don't think it needs to go outside this meeting if you're all in agreement. I think it's a very thorough report and the consultation seems to be well received. There's no concerns from me as chairman. I don't feel there's any from members unless you have any, but I would just congratulate the officers and commend them on a very good report.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is item 11, the forward plan, pages 2. You've heard someone do that before previously, haven't you? Item 12 is the work programme, pages 249 to 252. Liz, do you want to say anything on this before we agree it?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing specific apart from perhaps what we mentioned earlier about trying to get a visit with the gritting team over the winter months. So that's something that I'm looking into, and obviously I'll keep you all posted on that.
Yep, thank you. And as always, if you have any suggestions that you'd like to do for frontline visits, by all means, just drop us an email. We will try to get it scheduled.
Yeah, I think one of the things I mentioned was a visit to the tips.
To the waste yes, we've done it. We've done it previously, but I think we can do it again.
Yeah, the amenity sites. Yeah, it is still on the list.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, could we make that the cage vans as well, if we could do half a day with them? Because I'd be interested to see the fly tipping impact. So I know it's bad in my ward, so I'd like to see it across the borough.
I think that should be a straightforward one to arrange.
Go for a day in the van.
Yeah, or the cage. Yeah. Okay, so that's noted then. I think that's everything. Thank you very much for your attendance. That concludes the business. The meeting is now closed at 9:01. Thank you very much.